So Shani and I are going to talk about a project we undertook in December last year to transform and fix a whole heap of very awkward journals content for migration to a new platform. So I'm going to give a brief bit of background on what the project was and why we chose Ant as the solution. And Shani's going to give more detail about the how we built the pipeline. It's very much a case study. We know that what we built is not ideal, and it's maybe not how we would have done it if we were setting up a process that was going to be used again and again. I think what we built is more strong and stable than Coalition of Chaos, but I mean we can't really tell the difference these days anyway. So what I'm hoping is that this is food for thought for any practitioners out there who may be faced with similar challenges. But if somebody, we're also inviting comment on, whether we could have done this any better. If anybody wants to take me aside afterwards and beat me around the head with an XProc manual, I'll be delighted. OUP journals were hosted on a platform that was over 20 years old. So in internet terms, it's a medieval castle. And over the years, it's been adapted and remodeled and extended a bit as the needs of OUP and the content has changed. But the maintenance on this is horrendous. So OUP decided a couple of years ago to move house and announced in late 2015 a partnership with Silverchair Information Systems to host a platform, to build a platform to host our 400 journals, with the launch to take place at the end of 2016. So we had about a year to move all the furniture out of our castle into the new house. And by furniture, I mean content, journal articles. And over 20 years, we've accumulated about 2 million. And they're quite varied. Over 20 years, the standards for marking up journals content have evolved. So we've been through several iterations of the NLM data model, which is now branded JATS, and we're at JATS 1.1 now. And over the years, we've also acquired journals from other publishers, and they've got their own idiosyncrasies as to how they mark up their content. So we looked at our 2 million articles, and we've got a variety. We've got some NLM, we've got some JATS. We were slightly horrified to find some Rococo Louis XV SGML, and a bunch of other weird weird items. So we had to get it into shape for the new platform, and we took the approach that we weren't going to, well, the new platform wasn't going to be adapted and extended to handle the content. We're not going to knock walls through and redirect the plumbing so that we can get the four-poster bed in. That way lies the horrendous maintenance that we already had. So Silverchair took our content and they developed an XSLT to turn this into what we're calling SC JATS, which is their own flavour of JATS. It's essentially JATS 1.1, but with some restrictions like you might have with a schematron rule set. And that worked on 99% of our content, which still left several thousand articles that we couldn't get through the doors. They wouldn't load to the platform for various reasons. So what were the problems that we had to solve with this pipeline? We had a bunch of data that wasn't valid, at least not valid against the restricted SCJATS schema. So the new platform requires that every piece of content has a DOI, and a DOI, just briefly, is a unique identifier, a public identifier for your content that maps to a URL, so that you can do things like migrate to a new platform and change the URLs without breaking references in the scholarly records. It's quite an important thing. Various other bits of odd XML nonsense that was going on, and we also found problems with our assets, our figures and whatnot. So we had files that had the wrong name or the wrong extension, or were in the wrong folder or missing, and we found things like PDF files that were corrupt, which is a little bit embarrassing, but there we go. So we were approached in late 2016 to build something quite quickly to sort all this out. So we had a look at possible languages for writing this pipeline in. You can write a pipeline in whatever language you're familiar with. So we looked at what was available to us and familiar to us, and what we could develop rapidly. There may be XProc fans in the audience. Last time I looked at XProc was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I found it had a very steep learning curve, and it didn't have all the features at the time. Maybe it has now that I knew we needed for this. So at the time it couldn't do zip and unzip, for example. But we have had success more recently using Ant, which is a tool from the Java world. So it's invented to simplify the process of building Java programs, and it's now got a bunch of a library of extensions, and overall that hits a really sweet spot for us. So we knew that Ant could do all the things that we needed for this pipeline. And the other advantages of Ant, it's written in XML, so it's easy to learn for people like us who are familiar with XML XSLT. It's well supported in Oxygen, which is our day-to-day tool, so we could write, develop and test it. We could easily deploy it to Jenkins, which is a continuous integration environment, so that end users could use it. And it's worth saying it's also very well documented. Anything that we didn't understand, we could look up easily. And unit testing is easy. You can run a step or a group of steps independently of the others and test what you're doing. So we chose Ant. So I'm going to hand over to Shani to give some of the gory detail. You see angle brackets now.
Okay. So how the pipeline ended up looking was these steps. First, we unzipped the files that we received from various different sources in various different formats into just a standard structure so we could work with them. And then we ran the SCJATS transformation over the content. Most of the content that we were dealing with had either already been attempted to run through this transformation and failed, or sometimes it ran through the transformation okay, but the resulting content was still not valid. So the next step was to run some additional XSLT that we wrote to handle further errors, some of which we knew about in advance and some of which we encountered through the process of running stuff through this pipeline and attempting to load it. And then validate the XML against the schema. And we also did some additional QA checks there for other problems that we spotted. Fixing the image callouts and image asset files. Check for PDF files that were corrupt. Any journal issues that had problems, we quarantined to be reviewed manually. So a journal issue in this context is like volume 1, issue 3, containing, however, 100 articles. So if the single article in that batch effectively that issue had a problem, then it would go to the quarantine. And then package it all back up. So I won't talk about the first and last steps because they're very simple, but I'll run through the others. So running the SCJATS transformation, Ant has an XSLT task to handle this, which looked something like this. So you can see the XSL, can I sort of wave? There you go. So you can see the style sheet, the input and output folders, we're sending it a parameter using the catalog for all the different DTDs that could be location of Saxon. And we enclosed it in a try catch. So if it is unable to run this transformation, it gets caught and you get a message, unable to run it, and it gets moved to the quarantine area. Pretty much every step in the pipeline ended up surrounded with a try catch, because even the ones that seemed to be kind of just moving a file from here to there, there was always some circumstance in which it wouldn't work. And that was the worst thing for the users, is if you try to, it gets to a step and it can't run it, and then it just gives you build failed and it stops and it doesn't continue to process the rest of the batches. So everything ended up surrounded with a try catch. Then we ran additional XSLT in a similar way. Some fixes were really easy, like if the taxonomic code was invalid, we just deleted it. Easy fix.
with agreement from the business.
Yes. Article titles were missing. Sometimes there would be some hint in the content as to what the title should be. For example, if we knew it was an editorial through other elements in the XML, then we could just change the title to editorial. But sometimes it wasn't clear, in which case it would get quarantined and someone would have to actually go look at the article and insert the title. And the same for DOIs. There were DOIs assigned to all of this content, it just was not in the XML file. And so we had to download the kind of holdings list and cross-check and then insert the correct DOI. So that is that one. Then we validated it. So again, Ant has a task for this. It looks like that. We couldn't capture the actual validation error into the message that you get, which was a bit annoying. You have to go through the whole log. Okay, the image assets. So this is where it got kind of more fiddly. So here's the situation that we had in the content. So in the images folder, we had, for example, let's say these 3 files. The XML callout might just say ABC123, and it's not clear which of those files might be the right one. Or sometimes it would say that, which doesn't relate to any of the files that actually exist. So pretty much the old platform was file extensions were optional, and if they were there, they were ignored. So they're completely irrelevant in the data. The situation that we want for our shiny new platform is that all of the callouts should refer to actual files in full that exist, and the image folder should only contain files that are called out. We don't want any extraneous files. The platform will reject the package. And sometimes the image files were corrupt. I don't know if you can quite see that last line, but they just sort of arrived and they were 0 kilobytes, so they looked like they were there, but we couldn't actually use them, and the platform would reject them as well. So this ended up taking sort of several passes to fix. The first thing we did was run an external script, which we already had lying around for other purposes. And that made a list of the assets that were available in the folder. So here's an example output, and you can see that the first one, it's got a width of 0 and a height of 0. So that's one of those 0 kilobyte files that we have no use for. The next step is to process the content XML and compare it to the available assets and make a match, basically. So sometimes the match was obvious and it was the only one. Sometimes there might be multiple possibilities of valid files. in which case we just had a set of rules that matched what the old platform was doing. So we prioritized TIFF files if they were TIFFs, then JPEGs, then GIFs, and so on, that kind of thing. We can then update the callout with the correct file path of the one we want to use. And if we weren't able to make a match for any particular callout, then it went to the quarantine. So this is the starting situation. Now we've processed the content XML so that it refers to the correct file that we want. Now we need to sort through the files in the JPEG folder and return only the ones that we actually want to keep. So the way we ended up doing this was to run another style sheet over the corrected XML in XML2 that has the full callout. And for each unique callout within that file, it would generate a result document that was called the same thing as the actual file. So it's not actually copied, obviously, the asset from the JPEG folder, but it's just made another file, and we're kind of using that as a lookup list for the files that we want. I did try a few methods of kind of generating a list and sending that to Ant as a list of files to move, but they were all unsuccessful for various reasons. So the Ant target, what it does is it iterates over the fake images, the keep images folder, and for each one of those, it then moves the kind of the real. So for each one of the results document images in this folder, it will move the actual file from the JPEG folder into our output folder. So kind of odd, but did work. Next problem was corrupt PDFs this wasn't a problem that we knew about when we first built this, but we encountered them. And it was really inconvenient to get stuff all the way through the pipeline, fix whatever problems, and then the platform would reject it. Wasn't able to find a way in Ant to open the PDF and then capture whether you successfully opened it or got an error message saying this PDF is corrupt. So kind of noodling around, I noticed that all of the broken PDF files were missing the EOF marker at the end of the document. So probably what happened was, at some point, either when it was originally uploaded to the platform or exported from the platform or then transferred to us, there was some sort of partial transfer and it didn't all make it. So this also ended up taking a few passes to check. First step was just to make a copy of the PDF and rename it as a text file. I thought, oh, I'll just check the end of that. Didn't manage to use regular expressions in Ant to check for the end of file marker at the end of the file because, couldn't do that. And unfortunately, it's found several times in the middle of a PDF file as well. Tried to read it with XSLT unparsed text and got fatal error, failed to read input file. Here's a quick, it's kind of at the bottom, quick example of what a PDF looks like if you open it in a text editor. So you can see the end of file marker there right at the beginning, actually, of the file, line 67. So, oops, that's the wrong button. Did a very simple regex in Ant to just remove all of the non-word characters, which made XSLT happy to read it. And with that, we could just do a quick choose statement and again use a result document to kind of record the result of whether it was an okay PDF or a broken PDF. Slightly odd thing about running this XSLT from Ant is that Ant requires for an XSLT transformation that you have an input file and an output file, or a directory of input files and a directory to put your output files to. And actually, this transformation doesn't need that. It's only making a result document for this PDF text file that it's pulling in. So what we ended up having to do was to copy in a dummy input and output file for each XSLT loop in Ant. And actually we had to name them something unique each time, because otherwise it just kind of goes, oh, it's the same input file and output file and the same style sheet, it's fine. So in the logs, it looks like it's running, but it's not, and you only get your result documents from the first time around of tens of thousands. That's kind of it for the pipeline steps. We started out just kind of distributing the files so I kind of built it and then sent it off, and then obviously came back with testing and revisions and so on. And at first we were just sending the files directly to the users who are using it, but that became really unwieldy, and version control was a huge headache. And we deployed it to Jenkins, which was a really great solution in that every time that the user put the files onto the FTP and then pressed build, we knew that they were using the latest version of the script that we had released. And also it meant that they weren't tying up their local machines running this, and it was very, very fast. So we ran some really big batches really quickly. Anything else about Jenkins? No? I'll hand back to Mark. There you go.
Thank you. So there were a couple of things that we might have done or we wanted to do but couldn't. So just briefly, we were going to, as the icing on the cake, as the final step, we were going to have Ant send the fixed content to the loader, and Ant has an FTP or SFTP task to do that. But it didn't work, and the reason it didn't work is because the FTP password had an ampersand in it. And we tried various ways of escaping it and passing it to the server, but none of them worked. And we raised a ticket to have the password changed, and we managed to load them manually. We didn't write XSpec for the XSLT that we wrote. We're big fans of XSpec, and we normally would do. This was a one-off, and it wasn't going to be rerun, so we cut a corner there. And we also generally do regression testing with Ant scripts. We use an Ant element called Ant call, which essentially means we can have a series of Ant call steps, and each Ant call is a run of the entire pipeline with different parameters each time, or different source data. So it allows you to press a button and process a huge set of data, create a benchmark, change a script, run it again, and compare your new output against the benchmark, make sure nothing's disappeared or got broken. I think opinions vary as to whether Ant call is a good thing or not, but it does the job in our context. Yeah, that's about it, really, I think. Thanks very much, and we'll take any comments or questions.
So how long did this project take to clean up these 1,000 articles?
We had a couple of weeks to build the script, and we were running it that time. We probably went a bit into January as well, because we were finding, as we processed more content and tried to load it again, we were discovering new errors. So we ended up retracing it over another week or two. So I think we had everything processed and loaded by the end of January. But yeah, most of the work was done in a couple of weeks in December.
Sounds quite impressive.
Yeah, when one of your slides also you're using a regular expression to process an XML file and get values from it. Did you consider using XML task to XPath into the files, or you could have used that to XPath into the actual XML files to find the references to the graphics rather than do it on your own?
I'm trying to cast my mind back a bit, but if I'm remembering this correctly, I think some of the difficulty was trying to, when processing the XML, to check what was actually available, so that's why we needed to run and make that list. I don't remember using regex for checking the file Which steps do you mean?
Been doing exactly what you've just done in your project for the last month.
Okay.
And so I've got a success using XML task to basically call and add to call for every match in the next path.
Right.
And then using available and add to find if that file exists on the hard disk.
That sounds like that'd be really useful.
Debbie, any question?
Yes, we knew this was coming. I'm Debbie LePere, and we expected a flood of requests for you for changes to JATS, and you never said a word. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Were you things you wished were different?
In JATS?
In JATS, yeah.
When we come to doing our book content, that's when we might have some more requests. I mean, our journal's content is what it is, and it's used NLM and JATS for many years. I mentioned how Silverchair built the transformation to convert to SC JATS, and theirs is a restriction of JATS 1.1. As they were analysing our content and comparing it to their schema, we had a choice of whether to fit our content to the schema, but in a couple of cases there was functionality that we wanted to keep, and they fit the schema to the content, but it didn't involve an extension of JATS. It was just removing some restrictions on the SE JATS. But yeah, we're doing books next.
Let's talk books offline.
I think there's going to be a few gaps in bits.
Yeah, I have no question, but a small comment. Shani, you mentioned you try to parse PDF files using this unparsed function without success. Of course, there is XPath, a binary model, which is basically a set of functions which allows you to read and access individual parts of binary file.
Right.
It's supported in Saxon, so you could use that because it would be easier than
That would also
just
be a
filter
lot
out
easier.
binary data and just access the remains of the PDF file.
I don't have a pen.
Next question, Michael?
Question about methodology. When you're doing a bulk conversion like this, do you try and develop a script that's capable of converting 100% of the content? Or do you develop a script that can handle 90% of the content, run it, regard that bit as done, and then focus on the other 10% and gradually increment to do a bit more? Or do you want a script that can handle everything and be...
I think the idea is a script that handles everything, but we knew we weren't going to get that. So, I mean, what Shani described was many of the steps that we had, and I pointed out many of the problems that we found, but we didn't cover everything. And there was stuff that we, were very, very much edge cases, and the time that we would have had to take to build those into the pipeline was not worth the number of cases that were fixed. So we had some stuff that we were going to do manually. So it's very much the process 99%, and then have some other process for the rest. So we had some SGML. The SGML went to suppliers for recapture. Our faces went white when we found the SGML, and we didn't have the time or energy to write a transformation to XML for recapture.
But it was always a bit of a debate when we found a new problem. We were like, oh, I could maybe try to add this into the pipeline, but should I? I don't know. Is this the only time that it's come up and I've just fixed it? So a bit of kind of knowledge of the content came in there, asking the people who worked with it whether they thought it was likely to come up again. Sort of thing.
Okay, thank you both.